Hello to everybody. Hello to everybody. Hey, we're going to do some fun things today. You are in a class that I've been wanting to do for a while because one of the questions that I get most often is, so how do I make the story work with the research and then also maybe how to, and then what part of the story? And then wait, where to put the lesson? And that's hard stuff. So I don't expect you to be ace at it. It's taken me a really long time to know how to do that. But today I'm going to get you started on it. I'm curious to see if I could get a sense of what you were hoping to learn today. Why you said, hey, let me come to that. Instead of watching the video, you're here live. So why did you want to come live to this? You put in the chat. Justine, I'm excited too, Justine. Yay. Weaving the story. Yes, Sherry. Okay, cool. Who else why did you want to come live today? What are you hoping to learn? Finding a flow between these elements. Yes. Live is more fun, Danielle. I like being part of class, Margaret says. Yes. I'm outlining and I'm realizing how it is to connect the pieces. Yes, Annika. Lisa, here live for the first hour. Okay, cool. Definitely watch the second half where I'm going to do a demonstration of me trying to work it out for myself with some content. Want to get better at making story elements flow, Catherine? Yes. Cool. How to keep the research engaging and not dry. Tina, one of the ways we do that is by weaving it with other elements so that it doesn't stand alone. Susan needs a refresher. Aw, you probably don't, Susan, but I'm so glad that you're here. You know your stuff. Jen, one thing I'm curious about is when to cite. I need to get better at this. Okay. Definitely ask Jen if I don't answer that for you, you know. Um, Joanne, thank you for being here. I love seeing you so much lately. Shirley, I want to learn how to weave in research in an engaging way and serve the reader with scientific integrity. I love that. Trevor, continue to learn techniques. Catherine, get too sciencey and nerdy. I think sciencey is a word, personally. I'm good with sciencey. Grant says it feels challenging to weave stories so that it doesn't feel canned and hokey. Okay, I just want you to know, Grant, that today I went to my gym, which is this total testosterone fueled gym. It's not the gym where there's a bunch of treadmills and everybody's in like leggings and stuff. It's just there's one treadmill. It's just for like lifting weights and being like, I don't know. It's just you wouldn't expect me to go, but I want you to know that I went in my Hallmark blanket hoodie that says I love Hallmark. What's my Hallmark watching? It's like an oversized blanket hoodie. So when I say hokey, I might be hokey, is all I'm saying. I might not fit the bill. Susan wants to get more confident with story. Taj says, it is the form of my book and always get negative feedback about the research part because it's a sharp shift. Ooh, Taj, do you mind coming off mute? I have curiosity.
Hi.
Hi,
Um,
what happened? What do you mean? People say that was too abrupt?
yeah, they say, I'm telling the story. I'm telling like a memoir story, and you're all involved with the ebbs and flows of that story. And
Oh,
I go into to try to connect it to some type of theory so that people could leave with some type of new knowledge. It's about oppression. So they could leave with new knowledge about oppression and how my story connects to that, which might activate their story. And that's the exercise part. So it's
okay.
exactly the formula I'm using.
So they are saying what to you? I that was too much of a shift.
Yeah, they're saying it sounds so, why the 10-letter words?
Oh,
Just shift it. I mean, just can you just tell it like you told your story? And if
oh,
I'm talking about theory, it doesn't come out with that same flow. It has technical stuff to it, right? I mean, it's technical. So
Okay, I got you, Taj, though. I thank you. That is
you think?
helpful.
Okay. I hope
Yeah,
I
no,
was clear.
100%. Now, I am, hopefully we're going to get to it today. If we're good on time, I am going to show you a very terrible piece of writing that I did, and then how I'm going to weave it in. Now, my style's going to be different than yours, Taj. I'm just a little bit cheeky. I use slang. I'm overly casual, but I guess I'm making an assumption because you said 10 letter words. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay. So, and I'm probably not as sophisticated as you, Tosh. But that said, I still think we can soften our language and make that research work. So let's just keep that, we'll keep that right
Okay.
here as something we're trying. I think everyone needs to learn about that. Thank you for coming off
Thank
mute.
you.
Um, Grant says incorporate stories that are sufficiently complex to make the point. Okay, I have to ask about that too, Grant. What do you mean sufficiently complex? What does that mean?
Hey there.
Hey,
The like taking an idea that I've been writing about and then having a relatively complex story that maybe follows the arc of a story. So it's got some characters to it and it's got some um like a climax and maybe it's
oh,
got some technical details, but we're able to kind of follow the theme throughout.
when you say throughout, do you mean throughout the book or do you mean just throughout, say, a section?
Well, I guess that's a question. Like I'm wondering to the extent to which smaller stories kind of achieve the purpose. I'm imagining smaller stories throughout the
Yeah.
book instead of like one long story.
Yeah.
But
So I call that longer story an anchor story, and
okay.
you can use that term if you want, but they're hard to come by. Like we want them, but not every story can do that because we don't get to control what's real, you know?
Hmm.
Not every story has the twists and turns that we need that's going to align perfectly with the lessons that we want to extract from the story, as well as opportunities to weave in key key points of understanding, how to, etc., whatever else we have going on. So
Hmm.
I guess I just say don't be hard on yourself if finding that anchor story is challenging because
Hmm.
it's almost like it's like lightning in a bottle a little bit.
Hmm.
So it's much easier to take littler stories, but cool. Okay, that helps me understand. And just as I said to Taj, when you see what I'm working with today, don't judge me because I'm just like a cheeky little, person who read too much People magazine when I was a kid. So let's just realize I'm not as smart as most of you. I'm not as sophisticated as most of you. So just keep that in mind. But thank you,
Thanks.
Grant. Really
Thank you.
helpful. Anthony says, learn more ways to leverage the power of stories. Yes, yes. Karen says, how to tell stories with a lot of elapsed time. Meaning for a leadership book, leader may take a new action decision, but it's the cumulative effects over time that are impactful. Oh, okay, I got you on that, Karen. Um, Rita or Rita, I was asked because I have an aunt Rita that has no, it's not, it's Rita or it's Rita. Yeah, okay. It's whatever I want it to be. Okay. I use stories because they can give me more credibility. Yes, 100%. Hey, Tom, love the process of researching a story and incorporating it into a teaching point. Tom's gotten really good at that, y'all. He's gotten really good at that. Tom Roberts has a book coming out, what, this fall? Yeah. And Tom's an alum of my workshop, everybody, and part of my membership community. And he's got stories like about Paisley Park, where Prince um lived, created magic for so long, but also about like famous races as in race cars and also samurais. And like, I mean, I'm telling you, it's this very diverse set of stories that are tied to teaching points. So that's about what you're gonna learn. All right, I just wanted to get a sense. Just want to get a sense. So a little bit of housekeeping. I want to introduce you to Laura Stone. Can you wave, Laura? She's on staff here. Sade Amherd, also on staff here. If you have technical questions about today, if you have logistics questions about today or the future, please message Laura. If you have a question you want me to answer, Sade and Laura will make sure I answer it. I don't keep a very close eye on the chat, just so you know. If you DM me, I'm probably not going to see it. So I just want y'all to know that. I'm not trying to ignore you. We are recording this, so if you have to leave, it's totally cool, no prob. If you will, I have ample time for Q&A throughout. Okay, so I usually don't save it up. I'll do one at the end, but I like to keep things really organic. This is a mini mastercraft. So mastercrafts, something I came up with because I wanted to do it. I wanted to be able to do super deep dive on one tiny component. Like I've done them on just chapter 1, or I've done them on just interviewing to pull stories for books. I mean, really tiny focus things. Normally they're 4 hours, but I wanted to do a little short one here, just to get you guys going and to try and be of service. All right, we're just going to dive right in. Let me get to my notes. Okay, so I want to introduce the two biggest questions I get around this sequencing, which is how do I decide which content to use? Anybody wonder that? Wondering, is this go? Does this not go? Okay. And then the second question I get is then how, in what order? And that's primarily what we're focused on today. So let's deal with the first problem. The first problem, how do I choose that this content goes in my book? I think you can get a really strong maybe. You're never going to have a definitive yes. The only way you know is when it's done, basically, if you're keeping it. But you can get a really strong maybe if you use the book fundamentals filter. So if you haven't read my book, Write a Must Read, it's all in there. The book fundamentals are your reader statement, who's your reader, your transformational core message, and your promise to readers. By the end of this book, you will, right? If you ask yourself, does this content help me connect to that reader? Help me support core message? Because sometimes we need a whole chapter or more that's dedicated to proving core message is true. And or does this content help me deliver on the promise, which is the main thing you're doing? If you can get one yes, then you have a strong maybe. If you can't get one yes, chuck it. Put it in a different book. Put it in something else. It doesn't go there. So you want to start by looking at the content you have and then deciding if it goes or not by using that filter of the book fundamentals. Now, some of you might not be set on your fundamentals. You might still be working on it. That's okay. The easiest fundamental to get right is the promise. It's the easiest fundamental. So if you can just at a minimum, if you don't have the others sorted out, use promise to help you filter content, then you'll be in a better position. And it's okay if you don't use everything. You're going to write other things. And you can put those other things, the things that you discard, into those other pieces, the other work you do. So that's how we solve the first problem. The second problem, which is how do I decide where everything goes? Here's what we tend to do that we don't know doesn't work because maybe we haven't tried this before. We look at all our stuff. I've got these stories, and then I've got all these things I want to say. They're called teaching points. That's what I call them. And then I've got a bunch of research, but some of it's the same. And then I might want to do how to. And you aren't sure how does that go? Do I just throw everything up in the air, see where it lands? How do I start this? What goes first, the story or the teaching? Or maybe the research? How do I pick? There is an easy shortcut to determining what goes with what, which content goes with which content. And that is you always start with the teaching point. You always start with the teaching point. So if you decide, okay, I have this thing I want to say. I'm confident that it does help me serve my reader or support core message or deliver on the promise, or maybe all three. Now, what stories or parts of stories are related to this? Help me prove this, show this is possible. Are an example of a cautionary tale related to this teaching point? What research supports this teaching point? Is there an activity, exercise, or other how-to that connects to this teaching point? What else do I have that goes with this teaching point? So that the lead is the teaching point, and then you organize what goes with it. It's that old match game from when we were kids in elementary school. Which things go together? The problem is we try to make them all go together, sometimes starting with story or sometimes starting with research. And it's easier to start with teaching point, because then what you have is a cohesive section built around a takeaway, teaching point, lesson, whatever you want to call it, that's cohesive. But we have to start there. Now, if you have another way of doing this that works for you, then you do that. This is just what I find is the shortcut. Any questions around that? Jen?
As you know, I start a lot of things with little anecdotes
Mm-hmm.
and then reiterate with the teaching point. That's like the easiest way I can write. Is that wrong?
No,
Okay. Okay.
no, none, none of it's wrong, by the way.
Okay.
Y'all are gonna want me to say this is exactly how many teaching points you should have, or how many stories or anecdotes per teaching point, and how many go in each chapter, and I'm not gonna say any of that. Because what you do is great, as long as it connects. You know, there's so many different ways to do it. So what I want to do now, let me make sure I'm doing this, as I want to get clarity about what is a teaching point. I've found that people tend to be a little confused about that. Let's say you're doing an outline, and I see this a lot with students in my workshop. It starts out with the things you want to talk about, content categories, right? So I want I want to talk, so if your book's about gardening, I'm thinking of Sherry. And then you know that you want to talk about certain things. Okay, I want to talk about the meditative qualities of gardening. Might be a topic you want to talk about. That's not a teaching point. If you say, give me something about the power of meditation and gardening, now we have a teaching point. So when you tell me exactly what you want to say versus the fact that you want to talk about something, now we have a teaching point. So in my own book, for example, most of my teaching points are the section headers. If you flip through it, you'll start to see, not every time, um, but I pretty much just put the teaching point right in the section header. It tells you what my main takeaway is. So that'll be a little bit of a clue for you. Why does this matter that we have these teaching points broken out? Because, for example, and I don't know, I haven't seen Sherry's stuff yet, but Sherry's coming to editing retreat, so I will get to see Sherry's stuff. But you could have a whole chapter on the meditative power of gardening, and I'm just spitballing here, Sherry. And if you wrote down just the category of things you want to talk about, then it would be much harder when you sit down to write to figure out what to say. But if you had say, okay, here's the 8 things I want you to know about the meditative power of gardening. Now, when you sit down to write, you know what you want to say. All these 8 things, and it's easier for you to take the anecdotes, stories, research, how to, etc., and weave them into those 8 teaching points and find some sort of sequence. That's why we have to get granular with the teaching points. Granular. What exactly are you saying? In my own book, I say the first draft is just math. That is my teaching point about, which it's a fancy way of saying quantity over quality. And but it's more than that. It's I want you to think about it as a math equation and stop thinking about it as trying to be a good writer. That's a teaching point. But if I was just talking about a content category, I would probably have, how to plan your first draft. Well, that's not helpful. Imagine you're sitting down to write something and it says on your outline how to plan your first draft. Okay, where do I start? I don't know. I don't have any idea. But, oh, okay, I want to say these things. The first draft is just math. And I start going through everything I want to say about the first draft. Now, I used to, when I was writing Write a Must Read, I actually just had one chapter on first draft, and it combined a bunch of stuff about inner critic trolls, which is the reason we don't finish. I ended up having to split it into two chapters. And that's because I had so many of those granular teaching points that I knew were really, really important. But I had to know what they were. When I sit down to write a book, I have to have those granular teaching points so that I can sequence them properly and see which stories are going to line up and which research I can plug in where. And so you've got to start with this first step of the teaching points. This is the shortcut. Okay, you have a tool that Laura is going to put in the chat. It's actually from my workshop. So some of you who are alums, it's not it's similar. It's a condensed version. Your version had a bunch more stuff. This is just a really simple way of thinking about matching up content. You can go into the chat and download that. And then we're going to do just a little exercise. I'll show it to you on the screen. Oh, Laura, I need to share. Okay, this is called content inventory. Okay, so what I want you to do first is, now you don't have to do 10. If you come up with 10, that's great. They can be rando, okay? They don't have to be in any particular order. They can just be as they come to you, but I want you to try and come up with at least 5, okay? If you get 10, that's cool. And then we'll do the rest of it later. But for this first part, I just want you to come up with at least 5 teaching points that will help you get your reader to that finish line. Get them to the promise. Explain core message, something. If it's helpful for you, you might think about, okay, do I need to reframe conventional wisdom? Meaning, are there a bunch of myths or lies that people believe that you need to knock out? That you need to tell them that's not true? That's one way to get easy 5. That's an easy 5 if you just start with the things that people misunderstand about the book you're writing, or about the topic, or about the problem you're trying to solve. So that's the first thing I want you to do so that we can work with this. And then we'll see if you have any more questions about teaching points after actually trying to do it. So I think we'll take 10 minutes. I'm going to stay right here. You can ask me a question during the 10 minutes if you want to. Again, I want a minimum of 5 teaching points, please.
Okay, I have a question, maybe a silly question.
Sure.
I keep hearing the word section header, and I'm not quite sure what it means. Like, because I have your book here, and I was looking for them, but
Oh, that doesn't have very many. Hang on. You see at the top here, it says you have no good reason.
yes.
The section header.
Okay, so it's basically it's like a little headline for what's coming. That's okay. I
Yeah.
didn't know it was called.
See,
Okay.
it says, does my content work?
Yeah. Okay, so I get it. Thank you.
Yeah. And incidentally, you have no good reason is a teaching point for that section.
Just really condensed little nut or a seed, and then you explore it below.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. People get confused when they don't know what's the point.
Yeah.
That's why I say teaching point. What
Yeah.
is the point? If it helps you to think of it as a takeaway or a lesson learned, think about it like that.
Thank you.
Sure.
AJ, I have a question. I don't know how to raise hand in here.
Okay, Catherine, what's up?
Well, I'm having trouble narrowing down like what's a teaching point. Like I feel like I'm either too broad or too specific. So, for
Okay.
example, if I want to, I'm talking to, young adults who are having trouble balancing their life. And so talking about what are time management strategies versus prioritization exercises. And then like, here's specifically like the 2-minute rule or the 5-second rule and like, are each one of those, I feel like each one of those are subheadings within a chapter. But maybe I'm trying to pack too much in, and I feel like that's kind of the place where I am with the whole project.
So what you're doing now is you're judging whether or not you need it if it's too much information. So the only thing you want to do is use the content filter and don't decide right now if you're trying to do too much.
Okay.
When you're outlining, then you decide. Because if you've got 25 things in a chapter, you probably do have too much. You probably don't need all of it.
Okay.
Yeah, but is your question around, because it sounded like you were talking about two different things. One being how granular should my teaching points be? And two being, do I have too many?
Yeah, and I think maybe let's focus on the first one, like how granular should my teaching point be? Yeah, is it like here's how to use this one exercise or tool that will help you accomplish this objective?
So that's more of a how-to that you're going to do, but a teaching point might be around what you said earlier, which is let's understand the difference between using time management and prioritization.
Yeah.
Time management is this, prioritization is that. And
Right.
so that's you teaching us the difference
Mm-hmm.
versus then giving us a how-to about with some examples.
Okay.
So we're just looking for the understanding, the teaching point you want us to get about.
That's really
Okay.
helpful. Thank you.
Sure. We got about 3 more minutes. These don't have to be perfect, everybody. They're not going to be, and that's cool. Okay, so we're just winding down the last few seconds. I'm going to show you something. And so I'm working on this. I've been tinkering with a book for a long time. I'm not writing this book anytime soon. It's not the second book I'm working on, just FYI. But I've been playing with it for a while. I also have a keynote on the same topic, also not doing that. So just want to manage your expectations. I'm just playing around. But I thought that I would show you what I do and give you this is a much easier way. So I have this book I want to do called Please Sell Your Book. And it's just like me begging. It's basically the title. It's just please sell it. So keep it's for authors who want to have a success with their book, but they don't know what to do about that. All right, let me share screen with you. Here we go. So I wanted to show you what I mean by teaching points, and next we're going to do supportive content. So if I give you some context, I think that will help with this next little exercise. Can y'all see that okay? Okay. So I'll scroll up to show you this I did in color. You can see I've outlined, this is my very, very rough, y'all, very rough. But everything is in sequence. You can also see, just so you all know, like this is, I don't know. I don't know on this one, and that's fine. I'm just leaving that there. I'm not stressed. So I want to show you that it's okay if you don't quite know what's going to go there. Um, and then you can also, um, see, I yell at myself in all caps, just to remind myself of things. So I'm just telling you, it's all good, right? There's no perfection. This is what I wanted to show you. is I wanted to give you a sense of this. If you look behind me, I've got an outline color coded behind me with post-it notes. This is me doing that with just the bullets. It's the same thing where I give anything that's narrative driven, like anecdotes, case studies, stories, one color, research another color, how to another color, etc., teaching points another color, etc. And that helps me to see where I have maybe too much of one thing condensed and maybe I need to break it up. That's another factor, you know? So when you just look at color, you can see, oh, okay, I might, maybe I have a really long run of just stories. We have an issue there. We don't have enough broken up. So you can see, I'm going to show you teaching points. These are my teaching points so you can get a sense of it. This is a chapter on what I call pre-order or flex season. Flex is not my term. It's a Celeste Fine term. She's a super agent. And I've written about her twice in my tips emails. So y'all probably heard about her if you read those. At any rate, uh, this is a teaching point. Pre-order season is your time to flex. This is a teaching point I've said a million times. Your publisher is not your boss or your fairy godmother. Your publisher is your partner. That is the truth. Here's another teaching point. You need a lot of pre-orders to get on the New York Times bestseller list. All your pre-orders count in your first week of sales. Don't hoard pre-orders until launch day. There's a lot about pre-orders. You need more than you think, and then your book deserves your flex. This is more factual. You need more pre-orders than you think. Maybe correcting how many should I get? Most people don't know. But then this is more like, I really need you to shift your mindset, to stop thinking that you don't you're not going to show up in that way, that you don't want to brag or you don't want to push or you don't want to be in too much in people's faces. So this is that kind of teaching point, which is more emotional. You can have factual, you can have emotional, you can have mindset shifts. And then if you see here, and I might change this, just so everything's working. It's not, nothing is set in stone. You can see that I'll go down to, because I'm going to show you this today, I think. I have this teaching point. Don't hoard your pre-orders, and all your pre-orders count on your first week of sales. And I have a case study. This is the narrative piece. Case studies, anecdotes, and stories are narrative that supports both of these teaching points. And then I have another little anecdote from my personal experience. And this is my little note to myself, right? You don't have to know what this means. I do. This is my outline, right? But it's about this 99-cent Amazon trick, Kindle trick, I should say. Put this in here for myself. And then I also have this research on sales data that I can weave in. And this is a how-to, right? So you can see these are all sort of connected and support both of these teaching points. If I scroll up here, I didn't do the colors, but you can see here, most authors set arbitrary sales goals based on emotion or misinformation. That's a teaching point. Lack of knowledge feeds insecurity and becomes the evidence that your inner critic troll was right about you. These are separate teaching points. This story about a book sales goal question connects to arbitrary sales goals, right? So this is supportive, even though they're flipped. The teaching point doesn't have to come first, by the way. Even though they're flipped, this story is supportive of this teaching point, illustrative. Okay. So I wanted to just show you, and I can show you more of this if y'all want to see it. But for context, the next part of the exercise is, let me get to the homework again. In your sheet that you downloaded, and again, this is a tool I use in my workshop. It's not the whole tool, but it's part of it. I want you to then take one of, try to do this with as many as you can. I'd love if you could do it for 5. So, teaching point right here, write the teaching point. Okay, pick one, any one, doesn't matter. What are some stories that will help my reader understand my teaching point? Just write it in a way that makes sense for you. For me, it could be just Amazon 99-cent thing. That would be to jog my memory, right? Remember that it can be a cautionary tale, all right? It doesn't have to be uh positive. It can be negative. Sometimes those are the best stories. Just list whatever. There's no magic number. Maybe you have 1 here. Maybe you can come up with 3. It doesn't matter. Just jot it down. All you're doing is creating an inventory of content. Then what's the research that supports the teaching point? If you have any, you don't have to. I have no research in my book, Write a Must Read. That was a conscious choice. 0, none in there at all. I'm going to have a bunch in this Please Sell Your Book for sure. So what could that be? And it doesn't have to, if you don't have the citation, that's okay. In my outline that I just showed you, I have notes to myself that say, go find that article, right? Because I remember it, but I don't necessarily have it. That's okay. Just jot down what the research, and you could also do TBD, right? I need stat about X, and then just put TBD. That's also fine. It's just a way to say this is something that I know I'm going to get because I think it will be helpful. And then here we have the how to. This is an exercise, an action step, anything you want them to do just qualifies as doing that is connected to the teaching point itself. And for many of you, there'll be nothing here. And you could also jot down other types of things that you want to include, but those are the basics. So here's an example from the book Clockwork that I wrote with Mike Michalowicz. Teaching point: productivity doesn't get you out of the doing, it just gets you doing more. What story connects? Mike has a Jersey Shore family vacation laptop story. If you haven't read the book, it's where this happens. This teaching point right here, this happens while he's on vacation. There's also an anecdote about Chris Winfield, who said something to Mike once about productivity and delegation, which helped Mike rethink things. And then the research is in Parkinson's law and how we will fill up the time. So this is all connected to this one teaching point right here. Okay. So any questions about doing this round of little mini workshop? All we're doing is just, I want you to put things together. That's it. You're not going to judge if it goes in. You're not going to worry if it's too much or too little. It's just what could be. All right. Remember, we're also applying that filter that we already talked about. Any questions around doing this? Okay, let me see where we are for time. I think we're doing okay. Oh yeah, we are. So I'd like to give you 15 minutes. So if you also need to have a bio break during that time, please feel free to do that. I'm going to stay right here in case you have questions. Try to get 5 of them if you can. And if you need to copy paste to make more room for more, go ahead and do that. It's just a Word doc, so you can easily do that. Okay, 1 o'clock. Okay, we've got about 1 minute. Right, it's 1 o'clock. I would like now to find out who will share and tell me what you came up with. And if you have any questions about how to connect any of that, or if you're missing something, if you're wondering if it's too much, I'd love to hear from someone who's willing to share an example of a teaching point and supportive content that you came up with. Erica?
Mine is a question. And I'll give an
Mhm.
example too, but so my teaching point is that it's never too late to find your passion. So I'm debunking a myth. And I was finding that actually for all of my teaching points, the how-tos were related to all of them.
Oh yeah, give
So
me give me
can,
give me a example of a how-to.
okay, so a how-to for the example that I just mentioned, that it's never too late to find your passion, would be listing 5 activities or experiences that make you feel fulfilled. And then what is one small way to reintroduce that into my life today for the next 30 days? So I'm finding that that also um, relates to my other teaching points, which would be like um, small intentional choices that align with your interests and values um, is more important than having an overnight transformation when you're looking for
Nice.
your passion. So I guess my question is, can I list my teaching points and then have the how-tos that relate to all the teaching points at the end of the chapter?
Absolutely. Yeah. You might that it could work out exactly like that. I mean, sometimes a how-to lines up perfectly with a teaching point, and sometimes those teaching points are all kind of getting them into action with that how-to at the end. Yeah, that's totally cool.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
absolutely. Yeah, great question. Good teaching points, by the way.
Thanks.
Do you have stories? Do you feel good about your stories?
Oh, stories. Yeah, so I was going to tell a story about my mom who got her PhD at age 68. Um, it's a pretty
I
cool
love that.
story.
What's in what? What did she get it in?
Um, Actually, she got it in social work, but she's a suicide prevention specialist for the
Okay,
military.
thank
So
you to your
she,
mom.
yeah, amazing work. Very important work. But that like her story is really, really cool and inspiring. Um, and then another story, like an anecdote, I guess it would be. I'm not clear on the difference between story and anecdote, but would be like basically learning how to walk. Like you have to like put your heel down, put your foot down, press your
Mm,
foot. As for like small steps that don't happen overnight, um, equal your passion, finding your
yeah.
passion.
So that is more like an analogy,
Okay.
right? So you're comparing what you're recommending people do to walking and using it to help us understand. And that's a great analogy, and that's wonderful. The difference between an anecdote and a story is an anecdote is a bite-sized little nugget, usually from our own lives, or it could be work life or personal life, often amusing, but not required. But it does not have a traditional story arc of beginning, middle, and end. And it does not have usually, okay, there's no definitive, but usually it's not also doesn't have high stakes.
Okay. Interesting.
So
Thank you. Wow.
so you might have an anecdote about your mom's journey to her PhD within the story, but
Okay.
the story itself sounds like a story,
It was.
especially if you can establish what drove, I mean, that's fascinating already. We want to know what drives a person to invest that much time in education at the age of 61. There's a story there we want to hear. There's something at stake for her that's probably really, really personal.
Yeah.
And so always remember if you're doing full-on stories that you have got to establish stakes. What will
Okay.
happen if they don't do the thing, get the person, find the treasure, whatever it is, what's at stake?
That was so
But yeah,
helpful. Thank you.
yeah,
No one's ever been able to explain that to me. So thank you in a way
you're
that makes
welcome.
sense.
Okay, I'm glad you get it because it did take me a minute to figure out how to explain that in the best way possible. A lot of times I'll hear people say, "I have so many stories. I don't know." And what's really going on is they have a lot of anecdotes. And so you can weave a lot of anecdotes into your book, That's cool. Most of us don't have that many stories.
Okay. And stakes are
Yeah.
most important.
Yes, and by the way, stories, there's no hierarchy. Stories are not better than anecdotes. People tend to think that because it's smaller, it's not as big a deal. A good anecdote is juicy, man. It's okay if it's just a little bit. So there's no hierarchy of special whatever. Anecdotes are awesome. Stories are awesome. They all serve different purposes.
Is an analogy considered one of the story-based or story-driven like sections of it or
I should probably make
categories of a
another
teaching
I
point?
should probably make another bullet about analogies. I don't give a lot of different types of content in that content inventory because it becomes overwhelming. And
Okay.
then people start to think, oh, but I don't have an analogy and I don't have a
Mhm.
contextual model and I don't have all these things that you could have. So no, it doesn't fit in narrative. You could just put it under other.
Perfect.
Just make a
Okay.
little header for yourself that says other.
Okay. I like others.
Yeah, I'm all about the other. I'm all about the asterisk. All right. Uh, anyone else willing to share? Okay, let's see. We've got, Jen, Ruby, and Danielle. Okay, Jen.
Okay, I think mine's pretty short. Let's see here. So this is um based on a possible future book.
Oh,
So
not the book you're working on right now.
no, because that book I'm almost done with and needs to go away very soon because I'm really
Are you at the I hate my manuscript
yep,
stage? Yeah,
yep.
okay. Got it.
So my teaching point is I don't know if this is too broad, but it's depression has many causes. And then
Okay, no, that's good.
just lost it. And then stories or anecdotes that will help my reader, talking about my own development of depression, stories of others who develop depression from various causes, including working in animal welfare. And then this is really broad. Just research that supports. I just put journal articles and psychology texts that talk about the causes. And then for how-to action steps and exercises, I put TBD, maybe just a few questions for them to kind of wonder about, but otherwise save a lot of these for a workbook.
Okay.
Mm,
Reflection questions are always nice. So I'm going to invite you to go deeper, Jen, because
Yeah.
when I hear the teaching point, depression has many causes, it sounds like you're trying to uh, illuminate something that maybe people wrongly think there's just the one cause or there's just a couple causes. Are you trying to tell us that because You want us to understand that it could be a lot of things.
Mhm.
So then I really want you to think about, is there research that shows, and be specific in the research so that how does our misunderstanding about depression's causes keep us from getting better or taking action? And then ask yourself which parts of these stories I want to include, um, speak to feeling that waking up to the fact that there might be a cause you weren't aware of. Because if you're, it sounds like you might be debunking a myth that can be harmful to people because they think, well, that can't cause, that can't cause depression. How could it be that?
And also, I think debunking the myth that, well, I caused this or I have
Yeah,
depression because I'm weak, that sort of thing.
100%. So I want you to think about that. It's not, you could just do, here are the causes, here's some examples, but I think that's not what you're trying to do. I think you're trying to tell people it's not your fault. Here's all the things it could be. It's just like, it's just like a drive-through menu. So that's different than presenting all the things. That's shifting a mindset.
Yeah, I
Do you
really haven't
see
thought
that?
about this book, so I just kind of pulled this out from my.
No, but I mean, does that make
It
sense?
does, yeah.
Okay, cool. I'm
Thank you.
excited.
Thanks.
Okay, Ruby.
Hey, okay, so my book is about, well, it's called How to Stop Scrolling. And the teaching point that I was thinking about was instead of being at the beck and call of your notifications, you need to decide when you interact with your messages and chunk them intentionally, chunk that time intentionally. My story, I don't know if it's a story or anecdote now, but is someone that I worked with, like for research for the book, I worked with people. And this guy, he lives on the East Coast, but he worked for a West Coast company. And so even though he was done with his work, he would just keep getting a flow of messages from work all evening. And it was even kind of like impacting his relationship with his fiance because she was just like,
Mm,
why are you always on your phone? Um, so we talked about that, and we talked about chunking. Like, why don't you choose when you're going to deal with all the work messages, and when you're not in that chunk of time, you put on a do not disturb that blocks all of those messages because he doesn't have a work phone. That's another strategy you could use is if it's available to you, you should have a work phone and then just don't have it when you're not working. But anyway, he didn't have a work phone. And so he decided to chunk. And when I met him a month later, what he had decided upon was have a specialized do not disturb filter. So he's not getting any work related messages when he's not working. And then his fiance went to bed before him. So when she went to bed, he would then take half an hour to work through all the messages he got because he also didn't want them on his desk the next morning. Like there was also that reason that was compelling him to kind of want to get them done, which I think is common for all of us. And then he would get ready to go to bed. And then research, I was thinking I was going to put research about how interruptions can affect our focus, productivity, switch time, how it can actually take you hours to get back into the flow state that you were in with just one notification. And then for action steps, kind of working you through what you should do. So, like, what notifications should you turn off? Do you need app blockers? Do you want to have different do not disturbs? Like I personally have a do not disturb called Nanny because I'm a mom, so it blocks everything except messages from sitters. Um, so that's what I'm bringing for feedback.
First of all, I just learned about 5 things from you. So that was really cool.
Oh, thank you.
Um, yeah, I love that. I could have a filter for, like anything to do with my mom or my kid, and then I wouldn't be dealing. Oh, that would be amazing. Okay, I'm gonna learn that. But first of all, gold stars all around for you, Ruby. That story, first of all, that is a story, especially if you can demonstrate stakes with both work and his significant other,
Mm.
meaning things, he can't totally ignore work because he has to work and he's in a different time zone. And, significant other is not happy. So that's going to lead to bad outcomes. So that's a great story. And the research is totally on point. And that's just a perfect little section right there that you just lined up exactly right. Now, you can do this any old way you want. You can start with his story, and then you could come in and show that you weave the research in before you get to the solution. Then you could say, this is what I proposed to him. Here are a number of solutions you could try. Here's how things worked out. Right? You could do it
Mhm.
like that. You could also start with the research on, how distracted we get. Case in point, this client I worked with, this is what was happening, right? So there's a number of ways you can take all of that and weave it together. It's whatever feels right for you. And sometimes sometimes I'll make that decision based on what I have been doing because I don't want every section to lead with a story, and I don't want so I'll look and see, okay, let me vary this a little bit. And sometimes is the story awesome where I can get a good hook in the opening line, and you could totally with that story, if you're gonna lose your girlfriend over it, so you got a problem. So yeah, that's good. That's gonna be a good section. You did that
Thank you.
exactly. Yep, on point. I hope that
Thanks so
exercise was
much, AJ.
helpful to you.
It was very helpful. Thank
Yeah,
you. I'm currently trying to
good.
figure out how to put all the research in, so it's very helpful. Thank you.
So I would just honestly introduce for me, I would start with the story, and then I would say, I would start with honestly, I would start with something that his girlfriend said to him,
Mm.
like, dude, get your what together or whatever. And then I would say what was happening, and I would be really specific, like date night goes like this, right? Like blah, 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 message, message, message. This isn't just annoying, this also interrupts our flow. We need
Mhm.
flow, blah, blah, blah. Research shows, blah, blah, blah. But the problem is, what was he? So you can stay in the problem longer. We don't have to
Mhm.
take a story and tell the whole story
Mhm.
and then do the research. We can
Mhm.
introduce the problem, let the research support the problem, right? Because
Mhm.
the research you cited is actually in support of the issue.
Mhm.
The research you cited is not in support of the solution. That's the distinction. Is the research you have in support of the solution, or is it in support of the problem? So then line it up with the problem. Then you can say, but it's actually, there's more at stake than just the girlfriend because he's got to answer work texts. And so what does he do? Here are some of the solutions that I proposed to him. Here's some solutions you could try. Close it out with, here's what happened.
Mm.
Don't forget results. Tell us what happened. Are they still together? When's the wedding? What's happening?
They're getting married in
Um,
France this summer.
okay, yes,
Yeah.
right? And then you can even be cheeky and be like, it's gonna be like a wedding blocker, or the phone's encased in a block of ice,
They'll have a
whatever.
phone check. Yeah.
Yeah. But that is a tight, memorable, impactful, super helpful section that we just sequenced for you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Nice. This is what I wanted to show you guys, So that's why I wanted you to give me your stuff so we can play with your stuff. We still have time. So Danielle, what you got?
Hi, AJ.
Hi.
Um, Hi, everybody. Um, I have um, my teaching point is your child needs you to be what they need, not what you wanted as a child.
Okay,
Because
what you
that's
needed as a
important,
child, not what you wanted. Okay.
right?
Great.
Did I say that wrong?
I
Your
just
child?
well, I'm sorry. It's an occupational hazard. I just reordered it in my brain. Your
Okay.
child wants you to be what you needed as a child, not what you wanted. I just changed a couple words. Don't even worry about it.
But yeah, that's not the meaning. What I'm trying to say is debunk them. There's a myth out there that says you have to be the woman that you wanted as a child,
Yeah, no,
right?
that's
Right? And we're saying the
yeah.
same thing.
Yeah, we're saying the same thing. It's okay.
Okay.
Let's just
It threw me
yeah,
off.
I
It threw
got
me
you.
off. Okay.
Be what you needed as a child, not what you wanted. Right? Has to be what you
No,
needed.
no,
Oh,
no.
you are? Okay, so
I
say it
am
again.
saying that your child needs you to be what they need, not what you wanted as a child.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay. I missed it initially. There was something missing from the first one that made me
yeah,
have to
yeah.
reorder.
I probably said it wrong. My glasses. I need to get new glasses.
I need to open my ears. So
It's
we got it now,
okay.
Danielle. Excuse me.
Okay. So I was a little torn about stories, but I'm thinking um that must I have like three different ideas of what stories to use. So the first is with my daughter. Zoe is nonverbal and she's autistic. We're similar, but we're different. And so I had to learn to kind of put the expectations of what that relationship with her would be like down in order to be present for her. The other one
Mhm.
is for my son, who is way older. He's 31. I worked really hard at being different than my mom. And so that kind of didn't allow me to be present and show up for him the way he needed to be, needed for me to show up. And then I have the story of like my stepfather, who actually saw me. He's one of the very few people that I connected to when I was younger. He used to talk to me and be with me and just be very, very present and let me be myself. Um, so as I'm talking through this, I think my teaching point might be off. Um,
I don't
but
think so. I don't think
okay.
so. I haven't, it sounds to me like you have a main takeaway that's the one that you shared,
Mm-hmm.
and that's for an entire chapter,
Right.
and that all of those stories go in the chapter, but they have their own teaching points. Like you
Ah,
just said what they are. You just actually said what all the other teaching points are while you were introducing the story. You
right.
said, I was so busy trying to be something, being different than my mom, that I didn't notice that
I
my son
wasn't
needed something else.
right.
This
Okay.
that's different than saying being what you want. Like you were specifically trying to be different. Then
Mm-hmm.
you had the other one with being present.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third one was an example of being seen.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you probably have two. You could, you know what you could do? You could open with the stepfather story.
Okay.
And yeah, that would be a super positive open. And that, because whenever you have a chapter, you want to make sure that the opening content connects to the main takeaway, everyone.
Got
Please,
it.
if you remember nothing else from this workshop, it's confusing to readers to not know the point of the chapter.
Mm,
So the opening content could be a story, it could be introduction of research, it could be you talking directly to the reader and explaining a concept. But whatever it is, let the opening be connected to the main takeaway for the chapter. And the main takeaway is the one I bungled, which is be what your child needs.
okay.
And you could open with that stepfather story, and then the other two stories would be sub-teaching points that explain that further.
Okay.
Because it sounds like that you have the makings of a juicy chapter.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I was playing around
Unless
with it.
you're, are you doing this like prescriptive nonfiction? I think I remember you were doing memoir though.
Back and forth. I think it's a teaching memoir.
Okay, okay.
I'm trying to put those prescriptive elements in it because I remember when we worked together before, it was that write yourself free, that embodied writing piece that I want to kind of
Mhm.
incorporate this prescriptive
Yeah.
idea and presence. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, and I think the other part of this teaching point is like your manual is your child, right? Like there's always this, I don't know if that's a separate chapter or separate
That's
teaching.
another, no, that's another, well, it could be. That could
Okay.
be its own chapter, but it could also be a teaching point within this one. And sometimes a teaching point within a chapter becomes its own thing, you know? Earlier I
Okay.
said I had to split up. I have in my own book, I have two chapters I'm writing the first draft. One is on the mechanics of it, like just getting that quantity over quality. And the second is really just dealing with resistance, inner critic trolls. but
Okay.
I wasn't gonna separate. I finally was like, I gotta separate that because I had too much going on about that. So you don't, it's okay. You can start it in there, and if it starts to be too much, you can always move it into its own chapter. But it sounds like you have a pretty that all that belongs together.
Okay. Um,
Yeah.
and the the research that I wanted to use to support this teaching point, I'm a big follower of, I never say his name correctly, Gabor Mate or Gabor something, but
Mate. Yeah.
yeah,
The myth
um,
of normal.
yeah, him, yeah. And so that research he's done on, how not to ruin your child, being present,
Yeah.
being attentive. So that's the research I wanted to use. Um,
Okay.
not quite sure what the exercise is that I want to do. Maybe something, like I said, like an embodied writing exercise, something that has promotes deep reflection and pinpoints a moment. Um, so I'm not really sure there how to incorporate that.
I mean,
Not go ahead.
an
Sorry.
exercise that helped people explore what they did need as a child or want as a child, and see and just examine whether they made that, whether they're behaving in that way now, if those were conscious choices. I mean, look, Danielle, I did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was a completely alone, like most Gen Xers. I was completely alone most of the time. But for me, it went beyond that. For me, is Joanne still here? For me, it was like abandonment stuff, right? So I went to the other extreme with like, I will meet that bus every single day. You know, I will be there 110%. Um, so I would choose that exercise, right? I'm going to explore that choice I made. I was a conscious choice. Um, but then I would also be really inspired to learn from you and think about in what ways did that become a problem for my kid? Because it did. So, you know, you're onto something. I think it's great, but don't forget you don't have to give us an exercise every time. It's just if you the only reason you would do it would be if you think that we need it in order to get to the promise.
Okay. But isn't exercise what makes prescriptive nonfiction, or a teaching memoir a teaching memoir?
And sometimes it's just teaching us stuff and shifting our perspective. It doesn't have to be um full of exercises, but also it could have one exercise in the whole book. It could have you could have chapters where there's nothing. You
Oh,
don't
okay.
now, okay, I warn you, just want to warn the world here. Some editors are very stuck on systematizing structure. And they don't think, well, wait, does the reader need that? What they think is all the chapters should have this. If you did it in chapter 2, you better do it in 3, 4, 5, and 6. I am a little bit of a rebel about this. I think nobody does these exercises for that precise reason. How many of you have skipped exercises in books? Just a show of hands. Yes, everybody in the world. Okay? Part of it is that reason, forcing ourselves to do the thing because we did it in the previous chapter or because it's called for. And I want to challenge all of you to decide, do they need it? Is
Mm,
it required to get them to the promise? If the answer is yes, then include it. So I've definitely had students who had to explain this to their editors. So I always feel a little bad when they come back and they're like, they want me to have an action step at the end of each chapter, but I only have 4 in the book, and that's the only ones I want. And I always tell them, push back and explain why, you know? So that's why this is not a formula for you, Danielle. It's what works for that teaching point.
I like that. That frees me so much because
Free.
I was like, oh, if I want this to be prescriptive nonfiction or teaching memoir, I have to have all these things and elements in it. I was just like, oh, can't
Now,
I just tell stories? Okay.
you can tell the stories, but it's not going to be teaching memoir unless you do teach us thing.
Yeah. I meant that. Tell the stories to
Yeah.
teach the
And
point.
maybe you're going to have a bunch of exercises at the end and you don't want them to mock up the chapters. Or maybe you, like me, I didn't put all my stuff at the end. I put it where it goes. Stop what you're doing now and do this thing right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I knew y'all needed. And so it's going to be different for everybody. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I want you to just, again, consider the reader. That's what I want. Consider the reader.
Thank you. That was so helpful. Thank you very much.
Yeah. And you're welcome. And to everybody here, you might not know right now until you write it. So do your best. You're just going to feel about 80% okay with it. And then that's a good day. And then you try it, and then you might realize, oh, wait, actually, I don't want that. That's fine too. We're just trying to get enough of this sequenced so that we can write it. That's it. We're just trying to get a first draft. This is the first mountain. So just want to get over the first mountain. All right, Rita, I don't have time to do feedback for you, but oh, Joanne is here. Hi, Joanne. I hope you heard what I mentioned your name and I was telling that little
I did.
anecdote.
I did. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Wonderful.
But Rita, I apologize. I can't get to that because I want to move on. I want to show you guys something. All right, so I'm going to demonstrate now, and we will have some more time for Q&A. Let's see. Here's that outline again. Okay, I'm gonna pull because I wrote a little something so I could show this to you guys. As I honestly just dashed it off, so you can see how when I tell you that my first drafts are terrible, now you can see, and I'm comfortable with it. I have no problem with it. And this is gonna maybe go on YouTube, and I don't even care about that. So if I don't care, then you don't have to care. Okay, what I'm gonna do, because it's helpful, is I'm just gonna pull some of this over. See all this stuff I just highlighted? I think it's all connected. Not 100% sure, but I'm gonna pull it over. Now I'm gonna stop share on this and then pull up this lovely piece of writing. Uh, and demonstrate. Okay. Can y'all see this? All right, so this is a case study about 50 Shades of Grey. I have not read it. Well, I've read a little bit of it as I start writing here in this little case study. The reason I tell this case study is because most people don't understand how it became a phenomenon and how much of it was actually before the book was published by Vantage. It was, I'll let you guys read a little bit of this if you want. I like to show people how much was involved in building community in advance and why that was integral to the book's success. Can you see it okay, Ruby? You mean to make it bigger? Okay. Um, so like I said, I get a little cheeky sometimes. I don't know if I'm leaving some of that stuff. You can also see, by the way, just as a note, that I put stuff in brackets that I'm going to find later. I'm not stressing. This is that first draft is just messed up. I just keep it moving. I don't worry about it. Okay. You can see I've got two things in brackets here. So this is the story about what it originally 50 Shades of Grey was Twilight fan fiction. It was called Masters of the Universe. Never read that either. And E.L. James, which is a nom de plume, had another nom de plume called Snow Queen Ice Dragon. And Snow Queen Ice Dragon wrote Masters of the Universe, and she created a massive following on a place called fanfiction.net. And then what happened was, first she said, well, let me put that fan fiction up on Kindle and brought that community over to Amazon and then got them really excited about turning them into novels. She then wrote the first novel, 50 Shades of Grey. It's a whole series. I don't know how many are in it. And I suppose I'll have to figure that out for this. And then when she launched the actual novel in 2011, it went to #1 on the Amazon bestseller list. Not #1 in a category. #1 over all books, which is almost like an immediate, you're getting a call from a publisher. It's extremely hard to do. In fact, I think it was much easier to do back then. It would be really, really hard to do today. Much easier back then, but still, she leveraged all that work she had done and all the pre-orders to get to that spot. And then Vantage bought it, and the year later published it, and she's a billionaire now and all that stuff. Actually, she was a billionaire within a couple years. So you can also see, by the way, that I have note to myself. That's all fine. This is a mess. It's not great writing. I need to put all sorts of stuff in there. So this is the narrative component. And then I've got this other stuff that I'm going to probably weave in. So I could lead with, I kind of wrote this as if I was going to lead with it. You know, it's kind of got my personality. It's a little hooky. I could start like that. I also might completely redo this, by the way. Completely redo this and make it about, I don't know. I don't know. I might not like the order of it, and that's fine. Um, so this could be my teaching point. All your pre-orders count in your first week of sales, which can help you get on those lists. This is the research that I could definitely weave in. Please don't be daunted by this, by the way. Please don't. This research is true, but it's also based on blockbusters like 50 Shades and people who sell 10 copies to their family. So the average is ridiculous. You can't base it on anything. The authors I work with, they sell thousands and thousands and thousands of copies. So just don't even get stressed over this, please. But oh, you know what? Watch. I can put this in. See, 33% of self-published authors make less than 500 a year. So up here, I know I mentioned that she became a billionaire. Um, Here, right here. So I can, oh, I've got this transition here, so I've got to fix that. Hang on. I can do it here, watch. And I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna turn on track changes so you guys can easily see what I'm doing. Most self-published books don't sell well. That's true. Oh, I can pull it down from here. What's that other one? The average self-published book sells 250 copies. Great. According to, and I have to find my link. I'm going to put brackets, source. The average self-published book sells less than 250 copies. And this is from the same source. 33% of self-published authors make less than 500 a year. And then I'll add my personality. Ouch. That's a lot of work or not a lot of money. Or I would say that's a lot of work for yeah, I'll just do it. I don't know. I don't know what I'm gonna say. I'll probably fix that. And then so I've got the little stats woven in there. So you would think James would be in that bracket. Instead, she's a billionaire. Okay, now I have to fix it down here. So how did Miss James end up end up one of, oh shoot, see, I told you, end up selling, total sales data I have to grab. And you can see I'm also arguing I have opinions in my brackets because I have thoughts about the journals. Um, there. I can just do that. So now I've woven in this right here pretty seamlessly. That is right in there. And if I want to come back and say something about how we shouldn't worry about these numbers, I will, but earlier in the book, I probably would have made those comments. All right, so now I'm going to go down to this. I did this. This is out. So that's what I like to do for myself is eliminate the stuff I'm not going to use anymore in this section, just so it doesn't muddy my brain. Okay. All your pre-orders count in the first week of sales, which can help you get on those lists. Okay, this is my teaching point. I actually think another teaching point I have here that I'm just seeing now is that you need community. But it's already in there because that's how she did it. Okay, but I'm going to do this. All your pre-orders count in your first week of sales. How did she do it? She leveraged her community during the pre-order season, specifically her fan community. She built up a massive fan following. Her book hit #1 on the Amazon bestseller list, #1 overall. And so history was made. You may not know this, but well, I'm not going to be condescending. Did you know that all your pre-orders, no matter how far in advance you start, count in your first week of sales. They count toward all the lists. New York Times, bestseller list, and USA Today, to name a couple. Okay, and then I can expand on this, which I probably would do. I would say just a bit more. And then I would add, here, I'll put in brackets, add in how Amazon counts pre-orders because there's you have to be strategic. Oh, you know what? That's my other teaching point here. Oh no, it's not. It's a different teaching point about cannibalizing, how Amazon counts and cannibalizes pre-orders. So I'll add that in just for distinction. And then I can come back to the story. So I wanted to show you just, I started with the story, which is kind of what I like to do. I like stories are fun for me. So then I'll just weave in sections. So I got the research up here. And then I've got a teaching point that's really important to me, but then I discovered two more teaching points while I was writing it. Now, I can go back and put that in my outline, but since I'm already wrote it, I don't really need to. The whole point of having the expanded outline is so that you know what you want to write. And you can see how I'm not getting stuck here. I'm going to come back and do it. So this is honestly exactly how I do it, is I will just weave all this stuff in. Now I have some instincts about how things should be sequenced because I've done this a really long time. But then even with that, I might change it up and play around a little bit. I'll give you an example from a book I just finished. I can't tell you the title, but it's the new Mike Michalowicz book, which comes out in January of 26. I think I talked about this on our Don't Write That Book podcast. I thought I was going to tell this story about this woman who hated Profit First and then told everyone it was terrible. And then went to meet Mike at a profit event and said, I hated your book, but dang it, it works. So now she went all in on it. It was great, right? That sounds good. I wrote the whole thing. I wrote the whole opening thing, the whole exchange between them. And then I realized that is wrong. So I went back because what I really wanted to write about was how she used the envelope system when her husband lost his job and they were so broke that they could barely feed the family because he had a lot of medical challenges. So their first job was they had to pay the health insurance first because this was um before we had uh it was when you could be kicked off for pre-existing conditions. And so they had to pay the health insurance, and then they had to have food, and then they had to pay the mortgage. And she has this scene about the envelopes on the table with her kids and her husband and trying to decide which envelope to cut. And I was like, oh, I read the whole thing I wrote with this fun little exchange. And then I realized, oh no, I need the table. I need the table with the envelopes. And that's how it is sometimes. Like, I'm not mad at myself because I wrote this little open that didn't work. I'm just grateful I realized it, you know? And I knew that because I needed the emotional moment of that story. So anyway, was that helpful to see me kind of play around a little bit in there? Okay, good. I can do more of those things, by the way, if you all like that sort of thing. I also like playing with your own stuff. I like playing with the stuff you guys have. So you can see how I'm just looking for places. So I got the story down. Now, where could I naturally pull that in? That stat about how much do self-published authors make typically in a year lines up with her billionaire status. Big contrast between $500 and billion, right? Okay. I bet you know way more now about 50 Shades of Grey than you ever wanted to know. There's actually a much more detailed part of the case study that I would add, but again, this is not my priority book right now, so I mostly just wrote that to show you guys. Okay, you want the 50 Shades of Grey, Nicole? Oh no, maybe you want Please Sell Your Book, Nicole. Okay. Lauren Sade, I was thinking, God, let me just write this and leave it in community. And then we can just publish it in community in the membership. And then I don't have to go through all that stuff for it and just make it useful to the membership. Okay, so I wanted to demonstrate that to you. I hope that you've learned some stuff. I want to give you another chance for follow-up questions about sequencing this stuff. You can see that with the clarity, does it fit my book fundamentals? How can I build around a teaching point rather than just try and find a way to make this work, but really think through the teaching point? Once you've done that sorting, it's much easier for you to look, okay, I've got all this stuff. How am I going to weave that together? Like I was talking to Ruby, for example, and Danielle. There are many ways to go about it, but you can kind of see it's easier than you think. And also it's fun because you just try it. The worst thing that can happen is you won't like it. So you'll redo it. Let's see if we have, before we do questions, I have a couple quick announcements. We have our first Writing Sprint Marathon of the year, which is a totally free event we do. It is a blast. We get so much done. I think the last time we wrote, how many hundreds of thousands of words did we write last time, Sade or Laura?
We're over 4.4 million words in community. And I think we wrote 500,000 last year together.
Together on one day. It's a totally free event. I take questions all day. We all write. It's open to the public. You don't have to be in membership to come. It is a gas, and I can only do it twice a year because it is a lot of work for my team. But Laura's going to put in the chat where you can sign up for free. You can invite friends. Everyone's welcome. So that's number one. Number two is if you're interested, I am doing a full 4-hour Mastercraft deep dive into outlining, which goes way beyond what we did today, which is coming up on the 27th. And Laura will put a link to register in the chat. There is a fee for that. But those of you who are in my membership program, there is no fee for that. You just come. You just come. So the next Mastercraft is on developing a transformational outline. Okay, I think those were my two. Is there anything else, Sade and Laura? Okay. All right. What other questions do you have? Anybody want to share? Ask a question? Want me to walk through anything? Shirley. Hey, Shirley.
Hi, AJ and Laura. So happy to see you guys. AJ, I have a technical questions. As we
Mhm.
start to build this kind of research story, etc., I, as a part of good citation kind of hygiene, when we start the book, how should we approach it? Um, and I loved your newsletter last week about, the headache about doing it at the end. So what's a good way for us to do it? Because right now I'm just kind of putting it in a Word document, but I realize as we write a 50,000 word book, that's going to get really messy in the end.
Well, I remember your work, so I know yours is going to have a lot of citations. So I understand why you would feel that way. When I'm writing in a in my master doc, which is the entire manuscript, I'll take that whole outline, by the way, and turn that into a master doc with separate headers for different things, and then just fill it in like a paint by number. But while I'm doing that, I will add a comment, surely, right where where the citation goes, or I just just insert an endnote, and then I'll dump the link and then go and fix the citation later. I don't want anything stopping me. So if I'm in writing mode and I'm trying to get my words in, I'll either put it in a comment section or add an end note. And then when I'm done getting my word count, you can go through and use the citation generator that I put in the tips email, which incidentally Laura found for me.
The Scribbler one, yeah, that was such a great tip.
Okay, good. Yeah. But I mean, I often just have to go through and assign myself citation time, surely, because I hate it so much. So, yeah.
Thank you, AJ.
Yeah. I think you probably won't hate it as much. Just you have to deal with it way more than I do. Other questions? You did, oh, Ruby, you had your hand up, but you don't anymore. You're good?
Oh, I did have a question. So I just joined this community after finding your book, because I'm having difficulty with ordering my book. And so what advice would you give to someone who has already done a decent chunk of writing? Like I have, I don't know, 18,000 words or so, and now I'm trying to figure out, so I could read through it and kind of identify, oh, that's a teaching point, oh, that's this, and kind of like map it all out, or is that not really relevant to what we're talking about today? That's partially why I kind of lowered my hand because I didn't want to ask about
I
something
would,
that you weren't covering.
yeah, no, I cover almost everything. It's fine. All the questions are good.
Appreciate it.
I would wrangle that 18,000. I would just make sure that you everything in that 18,000 fits with that content filter.
Right.
Um, and then I would just do a high level overview of what you already have, just so when you look at your expanded
Hmm.
outline, you can see what's there, you
Hmm.
know? Don't spend a ton of time on it, but it would be helpful for you.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very
Yeah.
much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. That's not even that. You got that. You can do that. Yes, Jen.
Okay, so I'm struggling with citations and there's some that are really obvious, like, you know, X% of these workers develop PTSD. Okay, I know you cite that, but what about something like this? If you think breathing techniques are woo-woo, keep in mind that some of the fiercest warriors, the Navy SEALs, are reported to use this exercise to keep calm in the face of extreme stress. Just,
Is it
just
generally reported, meaning it's common knowledge, at least if you study Navy SEALs? Like that's not something that um I wouldn't probably cite that unless you go into um the benefits or a study related to it. If you got it from a study, you should.
remember.
If you got it from a book, you should.
Okay.
But you don't have to use a citation. So I just went back. If y'all could see my chat with Zoe Bird, who is a copy editor, she also incidentally happens to be my best friend in the world, and that is just a coincidence that we ended up in the same business. But I think I have from this weekend 50 texts about citations from books. The two of us just going back and forth about what's appropriate because we're geeks like that. So she will always lean on readability, y'all. Readability. So we're not going to have 85,000 citations. If you say in Shirley's book title, she says, short quote, that is enough. But if you're talking about a specific study or you got your statistics from the American Medical Association or whatever, cite it, put it in endnotes. That's where we landed because technically CMA, Chicago Manual of Style, wants you citing every single moment in time. But it's not, editors can make discretionary choices, and it's only time editors will do that is for readability. For example, you're supposed to spell out all numbers on under 100 according to Chicago Manual of Style. But if you have a book with that's mostly numbers, this can be so tedious. So an editor will make a choice. So what I'm telling you, Jen, is if it's from a study or a specific survey or you read it in an article, pull those endnotes. But if you're taking one little line from a book or paraphrasing a concept, simple concepts in a book, just say in this book written by so and so. Okay? All right, good. We got into the weeds there on citations, but that's okay. Seemed to be up and people wanted to know. Kieran, I see you, Sherry. I'll get you next.
I just wanted to go back to the elapsed stories, where there's a long lapse of time between
Oh, yeah.
and the impact.
Yeah. So you can just split it up. So what you would do is find, if you did it, just do a timeline exercise where you're looking at the major events in that story, and then how do those events line up with lessons? So you can weave in, then introduce the story, and then the lesson related to that point in time is one way to do it. Remember how we also talked about put the teaching or the research that goes with the problem and then with the solution. But can you give me a more concrete example so I can help you more specifically?
Well, so the book is about developing as a strategic leader. So they're very parallel, right? So, like, I, as a leader, could go take an action in a situation where I'm trying to have influence in a meeting, right? And I go do something different, and there's a result and an impact. So that's close in time. But my goal as a leader is to be like more influential, like bigger arc, right? And that's not going to happen because of one singular situation. It's going to be many accumulated moments of that over time to result to that impact. Same thing's true in terms of like a strategy playing out in a company. So it's that big, it could be months, years before you get the impact that you want, if that makes sense.
Well, so I'm confused. Is this a story about someone or is this the reader you're talking about?
Both. I mean, what I'm after is I think my impact statements, I know my impact statements, they play out over a long period of time. They're not short, little, succinct, do this, get this outcome.
That's fine. I mean, all you do is explain that. You just, if it's an action that repeated over time will yield some sort of result, then you just manage expectations around how long that might take. But that's different. The reader's journey is different than having a story about someone that you're weaving. So I was confused about which of those you're asking about.
Yeah, probably a bit of both. But if I'm trying to tell a story of somebody else's journey, like my own as an example, it's like a 10-year elapsed time journey.
Oh, if it's your story, then you're okay, that's easy. You're using the parts of your story that connect with the reader in the beginning. So in the beginning of the book, you're using your story to connect with the reader where they are. So you're finding the time in your own journey when you are where the reader was. But you're also saying, I got to this end result, right? You're fast forwarding to epilogue, credits roll, look at this happy ending. or happy for now, however you like to look at things. And then throughout the book, since we know how you started and where you ended up, at least for prescriptive nonfiction, if this were memoir, I would tell you something different. But for prescriptive nonfiction, then you can just use yourself as an example as you introduce different strategies, or you're calling them impact state, or no, that's something else, strategies or teaching points. And you can pull from wherever in your story, as long as the reader has context of, I started here, I ended here. Then you can, throughout the book, pull from anywhere you want in your story.
Okay, thank you.
Anywhere. You don't have to worry about when it was. You just have to orient them to when it was.
Thanks.
Sure. It doesn't have to be a linear journey, Karen.
Yeah, that's what I don't want. But there's a lot that's
Yeah.
oriented that way. Yeah.
That's really hard. You're asking too much of yourself by doing it that way. It's really hard.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, we're gonna run just a couple minutes over, everybody, if you have to drop, but I want to address Sherry. Sherry, yes.
And I will make this very quick because I know we're at the top of the hour. One, thank you so much. This was so helpful today because I just my head is spinning with ideas and ways to make this more concrete. And my question is, I cannot make the masterclass on the 27th, but if I give you an outline prior to that, can it be discussed so that I could get as part of the membership, so that I can get the feedback I need?
So the problem is the operative word there is discussed, Sherry, because I need to ask you stuff.
Right,
So
right.
unless you're bringing a representative, that was a
Yeah,
joke. Sorry.
I'm going to be traveling that day, so I can't even, squeeze it. So, yeah.
But you are in membership, so if you want to bring it to a craft call, and you want to
Okay.
talk to me about it, that's cool. Or you know what, send Laura a few questions
Okay.
that I can answer about it. But for me to go, I have to look at it and then ask you a bunch
Have
of,
the two. Yeah.
like, I just basically barrage you with questions.
Okay.
So
Cool.
it's not gonna work otherwise.
All right. Thank you.
But that's okay. It'll be okay. Don't worry. Thanks for coming today, everybody. I hope you gained some, helpful tools. I really do mean it. Try that teaching point matchup exercise, and that will really, really help you. If you decide you want to come to the Mastercraft, I'm going to be playing with your own stuff, not mine. So it's going to be a blast. That is so fun. And I'm going to be doing it in the moment. And that's really, really fun. I hope you come. If you please at least come to the marathon. Let's get some words out together. That is a free event. Thanks for coming, everybody. See you soon.